Well, there were many times when Debbie and I were raising our 8 children that we didn't see how we were going to make it financially. We were just like most other families in our church family, that there were lean times and there were times that were better times for us. But there were those many times that we just didn't really see how we were going to make it financially. You know, no matter how long we were married, there was always a need for more money than what we had. Through it all, we kept our commitment to always give at least a tithe, which a tithe is 1/10 of our income to our local church. In fact, I can't remember a year since I came to Western Hills when we have not given more than a tithe of our income to bless and to support our church family, and just to demonstrate our trust in God. So, how did we make it? Well, several important things happened. One is we learned to be content with what we had. That was a very important lesson that we learned. And then 2, we learned to wait on God rather than just going to the bank to get what we needed. And we learned how to stay out of debt. And then 3, we learned that you cannot outgive God. And then 4, we learned to expect God to provide for our needs. On August the 16th, 2012, I wrote my children a letter about how God provided for our needs and at times even provided for our wants. I want to share this letter with you, and I hope it will be a great encouragement to you. Well, after 2 years as a youth minister in Yukon, I was hired to be the pastor at Western Hills. It was 1984, and my starting salary at Western Hills was $25,000 a year. And we were able to live in the church parsonage that was owned by the church, so we didn't have any rent. But we still had that house payment in Waco of $262.44, and we had that house payment for the next 4 years. We finally got rid of that house in Waco, but we did not make any money from it when we got rid of it. The owner of the house just agreed to take it back since they had financed the loan. And your mom and I made a decision at that time that if God wanted us to own another house, He would have to give us one. We decided that we would not borrow money for any need except for for medical bills or medical reasons. You know, before we came to Western Hills, God was so faithful to provide for all of our needs. We did not have any debt when we came to Western Hills except that house in Waco. I consider purchasing that house and investing in the 2 oil wells the 2 worst financial decisions that we have ever made. We lost thousands of dollars because of my poor judgment, but God still was faithful and He still provided for all of our needs. From 1984 to 1997, all the rest of you as children were born. And without going into debt, we survived on a preacher's salary with a growing family. We never had what would be considered a large congregation or church budget in the Bible Belt. In some years, I did receive a cost of living increase, but not necessarily every year. We survived and even flourished at times because of gifts that people gave us. Well, how did God provide for us? Well, He prompted people to give us gifts. We had 2 cars when we came to Western Hills. We had a Chevy Chevette and an Olds Cutlass that I inherited from my dad. Your mom and I felt prompted one day to give the Cutlass to a needy family in our church that did not have a car. Your mom was willing to be at home without a car so that this family could have a car. But it wasn't long until Ben and Linda Manus told us the Lord had told them to give us their blue Cadillac. Well, we had 2 cars again until another family in the church needed a car who didn't have one. Your mom was willing to be at home again without a car so that this family could have a car and we gave them our Chevy Chevette. Well, my brother Jim had an extra car, and he said he wanted to loan us that car so we could have two, and it was a better car than the Chevette. Eventually, the family that we had given the first car to got another car and decided to give us that Cutlass back. Well, we gave my brother's car back to him, but once again, another needy family in our church did not have a car, so we gave them that old Cutlass. You know, your mom and I just never felt good about having two cars when a needy family in our church did not have one. Obviously, your mom was the one who had to make the greatest sacrifice. During this season of giving and receiving cars, our family had grown, and we had taken in a young lady to live with us that was really in need. We took in a number of people that were really in need to live with us over the years, and they each lived with us for a year or more. The Cadillac only had 6 seats in it, and when Caleb was born, there would be 7 of us. Jacob was about 2 years old. Our faith had really grown because of how God met our needs with the other cars, and we began to pray for a van. We did not share this with anyone, but kept it to ourselves, which that was our habit. One day, a fellow in our church called and said he wanted to buy us a car. And he took me shopping a few weeks later, and I drove home that day in a brand new minivan that seated 7 with all the bells and whistles. It was even blue, which was the color your mom wanted and prayed to receive, and that minivan cost $17,000. Your mom was now traveling in style, and I drove the blue Cadillac. We then decided to give away the Cadillac to another family that was in need in our church, and the church decided to buy me a Ford Escort hatchback to drive for my work car. After that, we could not give the Escort away because it belonged to the church. We've had 2 cars ever since then, and God has provided for the other families in our church in other ways. You know, we eventually sold the minivan and bought our first 15-passenger van with the proceeds. We ended up owning 3 different large vans, and we never had to borrow to purchase any of them. The last one we purchased with a financial gift that was given to us by several families in the church. I eventually sold it and used the proceeds for some gifts that we received to purchase those 2 cars. So this is how God provided for our transportation needs on a preacher's salary without borrowing for a car. You know, next week I'm going to continue with the 3rd part of this letter to my children. And I hope this is an encouragement to you as you hear our story to trust God for your needs. But also, I hope it's an encouragement to you to journal what God does in your life so that you can pass it on to your children and your grandchildren.